finished getting all the bearings replaced in this Chinese hit and miss engine, and I'm going to go through what will happen to you and how to replace them if you run the engine a lot, which I have. Okay, let's get to it. So you're going to need a couple of hex keys, one that fits in the main bearing holders and one fits on the big end. First we're going to undo these, loosen them off a bit. If you only ran this engine a few times and then put it on a shelf, it's going to be perfect for that. But if you want to run it, you know, on your desk most days for a little while, you'll find that the main bearings, which used to be under here, crankshaft bearings, are very, very crappy roller bearings that will stop working reasonably quickly. So I've replaced those with little bronze bearings. And we're also going to replace, we're going to get this off, let's see if I can get this off the way it is. So, well, it's kind of a two-hand job, but you also need to take this off. Now, run the engine long enough and it will develop, apart from the rumbling of the sleeve bearings on the crankshaft, you'll also get a clattering from this, the big end bearing, and even a clattering from the piston small end bearing. However, these can all be these are adjustable. These two bearings are adjustable. The big end here has got two brass caps and they're not quite meeting each other on the ends, which mean you can file down these faces here. You rub it across these faces here, you rub it across the file until when you put that on, there's no wiggle room. So we're going to take this crankshaft out. Here we go. So let me put the light on. Okay, it often helps to hold the valve in like that when you are taking out the piston. What I'm going to do is move this around so that that's it. The valve is open. I can now pull out this piston. Okay, it's been a month. I've gone through about half a litre of petrol with this engine. Sorry, been a couple of months. I've gone through half a litre. I'm just taking it apart to have a look at how it's going and how these bearings are going. There's a bronze bearing in there that goes around that goes in there, and the bearings that were in here have worn out. Replaced them with these bronze ones that I've made. I need to pack that. There's the bronze ones that come with it on the big end. But this bearing here and this bearing here I have made. I think I might clean this out. So first thing we note is that it is pretty well made. It's a standard piston. You got grooves for 2 O-rings. The O-ring that they've included, they have for sale on the internet. This is holding 1 O-ring. That's how it's come from the factory. Don't know if it would be that much better with 2. It certainly holds its compression pretty well. With my engine, this was starting to clatter. So I've pulled this pin out and packed the bearing inside. Let's have a look. Now, if I pull that out of there, okay, so we've got grease on this, and you can just see the brass. Well, it's not brass, but there's an insert bearing there. That bearing has 1 split in it. Then the split then seems to have been soldered shut. So I opened up that split with a razor blade and then wrapped a piece of aluminium foil, not the household foil that you put over food, but pie tray foil or roasting dish foil, a little bit thicker. So that is wrapped around that bearing in between it and the small end of the conrod, and that has tightened up that bearing enough so that it is now there's now absolutely no spare movement in that. Okay, another thing you should do when you got this off is wash this out with petrol. Washing this out with petrol helps keep the spark plug clean and the valves and the valve seats. It's a good idea. It's a good idea because it's actually quite hard to get that spark plug out from the other end. The only other trick, if you're worried about it, is getting this in the right place. Now, when the exhaust valve is fully open, and this is halfway, it's about there. This should be sticking straight down. The crank should be 90% down. That is so that as the crank comes around the bottom of its stroke, that's when it's exhausting. And so when that is fully down, yeah, so that's how I'm going to set that up. But first I'm going to go off and wash out the machine cylinder. So I'm going to use a little bit of the same slightly oiled petrol. This is not going to leak, it's certainly not going to leak badly. Okay, although I have spilt some. Now, actually it did leak because I had that valve open, so... Okay, so I've washed out the cylinder with petrol, washed out the valves, let that drip through and tried to get that spark plug as clean as I can. Now my challenge is to get this back on in the correct position. So remembering that the stroke that goes this way is going to be the exhaust stroke. Okay, I'm going to need two hands, so I'm going to need to turn off this video, get this fully open when that's returning on the stroke there. First of all, it's going to check. Yep, that's really nice, really nice. Okay, my little bronze bushes are, have wee holes drilled in them. They're going to need to be up. There they are. Okay, right, so crank at 90 degrees. Right, I need to double check that. So right, I think that's perfect. So I'm not too fussed about where the exhaust starts to open. Here. It's kind of at the end of the power stroke. What I'm fussed about is getting that shut at the start of the suction where it draws in the fuel air mixture. I want that valve just starting to open as I go past top dead center, so I can suck in a full cylinder of fuel air mixture. I come around, it's compressing it. I've got mine set to fire at top dead center for slow running. Fires, comes around. Now just starting to open there, very near the end of the stroke. Yeah, that's what I'm going to try this time. I'm going to push my bearings together so that I don't get any rattling this way. So I'm going to push this bearing this way, push this bearing this way. Okay, the method I've developed for getting these holes that I've drilled back into those holes is to use my fueling syringe So I want these holes to match up, so pop that down there. Yep. Okay. Now you guys probably couldn't see it, but my bronze bushes are a little bit smaller than that hole there. So I've sanded down, and not sanded, I've used a file down these a bit. I've also got a little bit more of that aluminium sheet from the roasting tray in there so that it's able to stand off, it's able to hold that bearing perfectly well. Okay. Again, we're going to use the oil hole finder. Oh, and there's a little bit of aluminium, so that's just to hold this thing in place. Okay, that's correct. Okay, and now we need put piston in, don't we? The reason that this grease is good for putting in the piston is because oil can be a little bit light and you can get a bit of rattling going on. Often you'll find that when you're putting this piston back in, it goes in better one way than the other. It's just used to wearing in that position. So I'm probably going to have a feel for that, get a feeling for which one is the correct place. Please don't touch it, sweetie, I'm in the middle of it. Okay, so this is feeling pretty good that way, very good. I'm just going to twist it around the other way, see if it feels any better. Yeah, it's pretty good both ways. I'm going to have to make a decision based on the wear on the end of the piston. So okay, it's definitely smoother this way. Again, we're looking for 90 degrees down